Hi, I'm John Wilder, historian of Aleppo Shrine and Boston Commandery. Today I've brought an interesting piece from the archives of Boston Commandery, and this I found at the bottom of a cardboard box that had a bunch of rags and broken candlesticks and a couple of bent goblets. Now this would have originally had a wooden staff that it was attached to, and some might call it a shepherd's crook. It would have been properly called a Crozier or Crozier. And this was carried by the Prelate or chaplain of the Commandery. Now the interesting thing is there is a cabinet card photo in the collection of the Scottish Rite Museum in Lexington that I have been able to identify as Boston Commandery's Prelate from the mid to late 1800s. Specifically from the distinctive officer's jewel that he's wearing, and he is holding the Crozier. And from zooming in, I can see it is, in fact, the one that this was attached to. Now, I believe this is probably, I don't think it's silver, it might be nickel-plated. But the really interesting thing about this is it is engraved, and instead of Boston Commandery, it says Boston Encampment. Now, we have plenty of records that say Boston Encampment. That was the previous name. I won't say the original, because originally we were Boston Encampment of Knights of the Red Cross. Then, after a few years, we became Boston Encampment Knights Templar. And it wasn't until 1869, late in 1869, that we became Boston Commandery, when there was a push within the Grand Commandery and nationwide to standardize all the terms. So a lot of encampments around that time became commanderies. Now, the other interesting thing that goes along with that date, 1869, is if you know where Boston Commandery meets in the Massachusetts Grand Lodge building, that building burned down in 1864, among other fires that were in those buildings. Boston Commandery, or Boston Encampment at the time, was the organization that lost the most equipment-wise and financially in the 1864 fire. In another episode, hopefully, if I can get my hands on one, we'll talk about what happened with the silver that they recovered from the jewels and equipment of Boston Commandery from that fire. But after the 1864 fire, Boston Commandery Encampment had to replace all of their equipment. So, because of that fire, where we know that pretty much everything except the records, which were stored in a bank vault, were completely lost, I can date this confidently between 1864 and 1869. Similarly, we have a flag bearer's harness with a metal holder that says Boston Encampment, and an almost identical one that says Boston Commandery. So that's an interesting turn. But this is not a piece that I've seen used nowadays by any commanderies that I'm aware of. I would be interested to know if any prelates still use one. And it's just one of those pieces that took a little bit of research and a little bit of digging to find. But once we found it, it's a great piece to have, and it's great to be able to narrow down the date so much to find that story behind it. So I encourage all of you to find that history, but to also do the digging and do the research to find out the story that you can behind each piece. So thank you for joining us. Remember, if you like what you see, remember to like our video, subscribe to our YouTube channel, and follow us on Facebook. Thank you.